When a lion cub and leopard cub both lost their mothers to poachers in the same week, no one expected what would happen next. What these two natural enemies did to survive will challenge everything you think you know about the animal kingdom. The morning mist hung heavy over the Serengeti Conservation Area in Tanzania as Dr. Elena Rodriguez made her way through the medical facility. As the head veterinarian at the Mkomazi Wildlife Sanctuary, she had seen her share of heartbreak, but the past week had been particularly devastating. In the corner of the recovery ward, a small golden lion cub named Kesi lay motionless, his amber eyes staring blankly at the concrete walls. Just 5 days old when rangers found him, Kesi had been discovered beside his mother's lifeless body, her magnificent mane matted with blood from poachers' bullets. The cub's tiny body showed signs of severe malnutrition and dehydration. His ribs were visible through his golden fur, and his breathing was shallow and labored. Blood tests revealed dangerously low blood sugar levels and the early stages of organ failure. Despite round-the-clock care, Kesi had barely touched the specialized milk formula designed for large cats, his survival instincts seemingly crushed along with his spirit. 3 enclosures away, an equally tragic scene unfolded. Zara, a leopard cub estimated to be just over a week old, had been brought in 2 days after Kesi. Her mother had also fallen victim to the same poaching ring that had been terrorizing the region for months. Unlike Kesi's immediate discovery, Zara had spent nearly 18 hours alone in the wild before a local Maasai herder heard her desperate cries echoing through the acacia trees. When the rescue team found her, Zara was hypothermic, her spotted coat damp with morning dew, and her body temperature dropped to a life-threatening 35 degrees Celsius. The prolonged exposure had triggered a stress response that shut down her digestive system, making it nearly impossible for her to process the nutrients she desperately needed. Her tiny paws showed signs of frostbite, and her eyes remained tightly shut, a protective mechanism against the trauma she had endured. Dr. Rodriguez moved between the 2 enclosures, checking vital signs and adjusting treatment protocols. Both cubs were fighting battles that went beyond their physical injuries. In the wild, big cat mothers provide not just milk and protection, but crucial psychological bonding that shapes their offspring's ability to thrive. Without this connection, many orphan cubs simply lose the will to live, their bodies shutting down despite medical intervention. The sanctuary's resources were stretched thin, and the harsh reality was that most single orphaned big cats didn't survive their first month in captivity, especially when found at such a young age. The science behind what Dr. Rodriguez was witnessing went far deeper than simple grief. When big cat cubs lose their mothers, their bodies undergo a cascade of physiological changes that can prove fatal even with the best medical care. The stress hormone cortisol floods their systems, suppressing their immune function and making them vulnerable to infections that would normally be easily fought off. Without the constant physical contact and warmth provided by their mothers, their body temperature regulation systems fail to develop properly, leaving them unable to maintain the precise internal temperature required for survival. More critically, the absence of maternal bonding triggers what wildlife behaviorists call failure to thrive syndrome. The cubs' brains, still developing crucial neural pathways, begin shutting down non-essential functions to conserve energy. This includes the drive to feed, the curiosity that promotes learning, and even the basic survival instincts that would normally keep them alert to danger. Research conducted by the East African Wildlife Research Institute had shown that cubs separated from their mothers before 4 weeks of age had a survival rate of less than 15%, even in the most advanced rehabilitation facilities. Dr. Rodriguez understood that both Kesi and Zara were experiencing elevated levels of stress-induced inflammation throughout their bodies. Their white blood cell counts were abnormally high, indicating their immune systems were in constant overdrive, fighting perceived threats that didn't exist. This chronic inflammation was attacking their own tissues, particularly affecting their digestive systems and making it nearly impossible for them to absorb nutrients from the formula milk they were being given. The neurological impact was equally devastating. Without the specific pheromones and hormones present in their mothers' milk, the cubs' brain development was severely compromised. These natural chemicals weren't just nutrients. They were complex biological signals that instructed the developing nervous system how to process emotions, regulate stress responses, and form social bonds. Laboratory analysis of the synthetic formula revealed it contained all the necessary proteins, fats, and vitamins, but it lacked the intricate cocktail of hormones and antibodies that could only come from a living mother. Temperature regulation presented another critical challenge. Big cat cubs are born with immature thermal regulatory systems, relying entirely on their mother's body heat for the first month of life. The heated enclosures at the sanctuary could maintain ambient temperature, but they couldn't replicate the dynamic warmth of a living body that adjusted constantly to the cubs' needs. This lack of proper thermal regulation was causing both cubs to burn through their limited energy reserves just trying to maintain basic body functions, leaving nothing for growth or healing. On the 7th day of their separate struggles, an unexpected crisis forced Dr. Rodriguez to make a decision that would change everything. The sanctuary's main generator had failed during the night, and the backup power system could only support half of the facility's critical care units. With several other injured animals requiring life support, she faced an impossible choice about which enclosures would receive priority heating and monitoring equipment. Marcus Chen, the sanctuary's senior animal behaviorist, suggested consolidating the cubs into a single climate-controlled recovery room to maximize their chances of survival. The decision wasn't made lightly. Housing two different big cat species together violated nearly every protocol in wildlife rehabilitation. Lions and leopards were natural competitors in the wild, with adult lions often killing leopard cubs to eliminate future rivals for territory and prey. The room they selected had originally been designed for treating injured primates, equipped with advanced monitoring systems and precise environmental controls. Dr. Rodriguez spent hours adjusting the temperature to exactly 38 degrees Celsius, matching the body heat the cubs would have experienced nestled against their mothers. The humidity was set at 65% to prevent dehydration while maintaining comfort, and the lighting was dimmed to reduce stress on their developing retinas. As they prepared to move both cubs, Dr. Rodriguez noticed something that made her pause. Throughout the morning, whenever one cub cried out in distress, the other would respond with soft mewing sounds from their separate enclosures. Despite being housed 3 rooms apart, they seemed to be communicating with each other, their calls carrying through the ventilation system that connected the medical wing. Marcus documented this behavior with growing fascination. In all his years studying big cat communication, he had never observed cross-species vocal responses between such young cubs. Typically, different big cat species ignored each other's distress calls, their brains programmed to recognize only the specific frequency patterns of their own kind. Yet Kesi and Zara appeared to be responding to each other's cries with what could only be described as empathetic behavior. The transport cages were prepared with extra padding and warming blankets. Dr. Rodriguez carried Kesi first, his tiny body barely filling her cupped hands, while Marcus gently lifted Zara, noting how her spotted coat had begun to show the first signs of healthy oil production after days of dullness. Neither cub protested the movement, both too weak to do anything but lie still in their carriers, breathing shallow breaths that fogged the clear plastic viewing windows. The modified recovery room felt like a sanctuary within a sanctuary, as Dr. Rodriguez and Marcus carefully placed the 2 transport carriers at opposite ends of the space. The decision to attempt co-housing went against decades of established wildlife rehabilitation practices, but desperation had driven them to consider options they would never have entertained under normal circumstances. Marcus had spent the previous evening researching every documented case of cross-species bonding in big cats, finding only 3 recorded instances worldwide, none involving cubs this young. Dr. Rodriguez opened Kesi's carrier first, gently lifting the lion cub and placing him on a heated pad covered with soft synthetic fur designed to mimic his mother's belly. The golden cub's head lolled weakly to one side, his breathing still labored despite the optimal environmental conditions. His amber eyes opened briefly, scanning the unfamiliar surroundings before closing again in exhaustion. Zara's release was equally careful, her spotted form even smaller than Kesi's, as she was positioned on an identical warming pad approximately 2 meters away. The leopard cub's rosette markings were becoming more distinct as her coat began to recover from the trauma of her ordeal. Though she remained curled in a tight defensive ball, her tail wrapped around her body like a protective shield. The monitoring equipment hummed quietly in the background, tracking both cubs' vital signs through sensors attached to specially designed collars. Heart rates, respiratory patterns, and body temperatures were displayed on screens that Marcus watched with intense concentration. Any sudden changes could indicate distress, aggression, or worse, the final stages of organ failure that had claimed so many other orphaned cubs. For the first hour, neither cub acknowledged the other's presence. Kesi lay on his side, occasionally lifting his head with tremendous effort before letting it fall back to the warming pad. Zara remained motionless except for the gentle rise and fall of her ribcage, her eyes squeezed shut as if trying to block out a world that had already taken everything from her. Dr. Rodriguez prepared the feeding syringes with fresh formula, enriched with additional electrolytes and probiotics to support their compromised digestive systems. Previous feeding attempts had been met with resistance from both cubs, their natural suckling reflexes severely diminished by trauma and malnutrition. She approached Kesi first, knowing that any sudden movement could trigger a fear response that might set back his recovery by days. The syringe touched his lips, and for a moment it seemed he might accept the nourishment. Then from across the room came the faintest sound, a weak, mewing cry from Zara. Kesi's head turned toward the sound with more alertness than he had shown in days. His amber eyes, previously dull and unfocused, suddenly tracked across the room to where Zara lay curled on her warming pad. The response was immediate and instinctive, a soft answering call that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than his weakened vocal cords should have allowed. Dr. Rodriguez froze, the feeding syringe still poised at Kesi's lips, as she witnessed something extraordinary unfolding before her. Zara's tightly curled posture began to relax at the sound of Kesi's response. Her spotted head lifted slightly, ears swiveling toward the source of the call. For the first time since her rescue, her eyes opened fully, revealing bright green irises that seemed to focus with purpose rather than the vacant stare of trauma. The two cubs looked at each other across the space that separated them, and something passed between them that transcended species boundaries. Marcus quickly adjusted the monitoring equipment, noting that both cubs' heart rates had stabilized for the first time since their arrival. The irregular stressed patterns that had characterized their vital signs were smoothing into more rhythmic beats. Even more remarkably, their breathing had synchronized, both cubs inhaling and exhaling in perfect unison, as if responding to some invisible conductor. Dr. Rodriguez decided to attempt feeding again, this time moving her chair to a position where both cubs could see each other clearly. As she offered the syringe to Kesi, Zara watched intently, her head now fully raised and alert. When Kesi began to accept small amounts of the formula, making tiny suckling sounds, Zara responded with encouraging chirps and mews that seemed to motivate the lion cub to continue drinking. The breakthrough moment came when Dr. Rodriguez moved to feed Zara. Instead of the usual resistance and turning away, the leopard cub immediately opened her mouth for the syringe, as if she had learned by watching Kesi's successful feeding. Her intake was stronger and more consistent than any previous attempt, and throughout the process, Kesi maintained eye contact with her, offering soft vocalizations that seemed to provide comfort and encouragement. Over the following hours, a remarkable pattern emerged. When one cub became restless or showed signs of distress, the other would respond with calming sounds and movements. If Kesi shifted position on his warming pad, Zara would mirror the movement on hers. When Zara stretched her tiny limbs, Kesi would do the same, creating a synchronized dance of healing that amazed the medical team observing through the one-way viewing window. Over the following 3 weeks, the transformation in both cubs exceeded every medical projection Dr. Rodriguez had made. Kesi's weight increased by 40%, his golden coat regaining the lustrous shine that marked healthy lion development. His muscle tone improved dramatically as he began to move around the recovery room with increasing confidence, though he never ventured far from Zara's vicinity. Blood tests showed his organ function returning to normal ranges, and his appetite had grown so robust that feeding times became enthusiastic affairs marked by eager vocalizations. Zara's recovery proved equally remarkable. Her spotted coat filled out as proper nutrition restored her body condition, and her natural leopard agility began to emerge through playful pouncing motions. She had grown more quickly than Kesi, her longer limbs giving her a slight height advantage that she used to initiate their favorite game, gentle wrestling matches that would have been impossible to imagine during their first critical days. Her green eyes now sparkled with curiosity, tracking every movement in their environment with the keen intelligence characteristic of her species. The cubs had developed their own unique communication system that fascinated the research team. They used a combination of chirps, purrs, and body language that seemed to blend lion and leopard behavioral patterns. When Kesi wanted to play, he would emit a specific series of soft growls that Zara immediately recognized, responding with her own invitation display of crouched hindquarters and swishing tail. Their play sessions were carefully monitored, but never interrupted, as they provided crucial exercise and social development that no human intervention could replicate. Feeding time had evolved into a cooperative ritual that defied everything known about big cat territorial behavior around food. Rather than competing for resources as their species would in the wild, Kesi and Zara had learned to eat side by side from separate bowls, occasionally pausing to touch noses in what appeared to be a bonding gesture. When solid food was introduced, they showed each other how to tear meat properly, with Zara's natural leopard precision complementing Kesi's developing lion strength. Sleep patterns revealed the depth of their bond most clearly. Despite having separate sleeping areas, the cubs invariably chose to curl up together, usually with Zara nestled against Kesi's larger frame. Their synchronized breathing continued even in deep sleep, and monitoring equipment showed that their REM cycles had aligned, suggesting their neurological development was proceeding in tandem. Dr. Rodriguez documented this phenomenon as potentially the first recorded case of interspecies sleep synchronization in big cats, a discovery that could revolutionize understanding of mammalian bonding mechanisms. At 6 weeks old, both cubs had grown strong enough to be moved to a larger pre-release enclosure designed to prepare rescued big cats for eventual return to protected wilderness areas. The new space featured natural vegetation, rocky outcrops, and a small water feature that would allow them to develop essential survival skills. However, the transition immediately revealed the first serious challenge to their extraordinary bond. The enclosure had been designed with separate feeding stations positioned at opposite ends to encourage independence, a standard protocol for preparing big cats for solitary adult lives. When their evening meal was delivered, both cubs raced toward the food with the enthusiasm that had marked their recovery. But as they approached the scattered meat portions, something primal awakened in both animals that hadn't been present in the controlled medical environment. Kesi reached the larger portion first, his developing lion instincts suddenly asserting dominance over the food source. A low growl rumbled from his throat as he positioned his body over the meat, his golden mane just beginning to show the first fuzzy signs of future majesty. His stance became protective and territorial, ears flattened against his head in a display that would have been familiar to any wild lion asserting claim to a kill. Zara approached her own feeding station, but the scent of fresh meat triggered her leopard hunting instincts with startling intensity. Her pupils dilated, and her spotted coat seemed to bristle as predatory focus overtook the gentle companion behavior she had shown for weeks. When she noticed Kesi guarding his portion so aggressively, her own territorial responses flared. She emitted a sharp hiss, her back arching in the classic leopard threat posture. The standoff lasted several tense minutes, with both cubs circling their respective food sources while keeping wary eyes on each other. Dr. Rodriguez and Marcus watched through the observation cameras, knowing that intervention could disrupt the natural behavioral development both cubs needed for eventual survival in the wild. This was the moment they had dreaded, when natural instincts might prove stronger than the learned affection that had sustained both animals through their recovery. Kesi began eating with aggressive intensity, tearing at his meat while maintaining vigilant watch over Zara's movements. His feeding behavior had transformed from the cooperative sharing they had practiced in the medical facility to the possessive consumption of a wild predator. Zara responded by dragging her portion to the farthest corner of the enclosure, turning her back to Kesi in a clear signal of mistrust and defensive positioning. For the first time since their miraculous bonding, the cubs slept apart that night, each claiming separate territories within their shared space. The following morning brought a scene that would forever change how the sanctuary team understood the depths of interspecies connection. Dr. Rodriguez arrived early to find both cubs sitting at the center of the enclosure, facing each other in what appeared to be a deliberate meeting. Kesi's aggressive posture from the previous evening had vanished, replaced by the submissive body language of a cub seeking reconciliation. His head was lowered, and he was emitting the soft chirping sounds that had marked their earliest communications. Zara remained motionless for several long minutes, her green eyes studying Kesi with an intensity that seemed to weigh his sincerity. Then, in a gesture that brought tears to the eyes of everyone watching, she slowly approached and touched her nose to his in the gentle greeting they had shared countless times during their recovery. The tension that had filled the enclosure dissolved instantly, as both cubs began their familiar purring duet. When breakfast was delivered an hour later, Marcus prepared for another potential confrontation by providing multiple small portions scattered throughout the enclosure, rather than the 2 large servings that had triggered the previous day's territorial dispute. The cubs' response exceeded all expectations. Instead of rushing to claim individual portions, they moved together systematically from one food station to the next, sharing each serving equally and taking turns initiating movement to the next location. More remarkably, when they encountered a particularly large piece of meat that would have been sufficient for only one cub, Kesi used his developing strength to tear it into smaller pieces, while Zara watched patiently. Once divided, she selected her portion and waited for him to begin eating before starting her own meal. The cooperative behavior demonstrated a level of problem-solving and social intelligence that challenged fundamental assumptions about big cat cognitive abilities. The transformation continued throughout the day as both cubs seemed to consciously modify their natural behaviors to accommodate their unique relationship. When Kesi's play became too rough, matching his species, typically boisterous style, he would immediately gentle his approach upon seeing Zara's discomfort. Similarly, when Zara's leopard instincts led her to climb to high perches where Kesi couldn't follow, she would deliberately descend to continue their games at ground level. Their sleeping arrangement that night symbolized their triumph over instinct. Rather than claiming separate territories, they chose a neutral spot in the center of the enclosure, where they curled together as they had during recovery. The synchronized breathing returned, and monitoring equipment showed that their stress hormones had dropped to the lowest levels recorded since their rescue. They had not only overcome the challenge of their natural programming, but had emerged with an even stronger bond, proving that conscious choice could triumph over biological imperative. News of Kesi and Zara's extraordinary bond spread far beyond the walls of Mkomazi Wildlife Sanctuary, capturing international attention from wildlife researchers, conservationists, and animal lovers worldwide. Dr. Sarah Kimani from the University of Nairobi's Animal Behavior Institute arrived to document their interactions, bringing specialized equipment to measure stress hormones, social bonding chemicals, and neurological responses that could provide scientific validation for what everyone was witnessing. The data Dr. Kimani collected revolutionized understanding of mammalian social development. Blood samples revealed that both cubs were producing oxytocin levels typically seen only in bonded mothers and offspring, despite their different species origins. Their cortisol patterns had synchronized completely, indicating a level of emotional attunement previously thought impossible between natural competitors. Brain scans showed enhanced development in regions associated with empathy and social cognition, suggesting their unique relationship had literally rewired their neural pathways. Conservation organizations across Africa began studying the Mkomazi model for rehabilitating orphaned big cats. The traditional approach of isolating cubs to prevent improper bonding was challenged by the remarkable success rates Dr. Rodriguez was achieving. 3 other sanctuaries in Kenya, Botswana, and Zimbabwe requested detailed protocols for implementing controlled interspecies pairing programs, hoping to improve survival rates for the hundreds of orphaned predators they received annually. Media coverage brought unprecedented attention to the poaching crisis that had created Kesi and Zara's tragedy in the first place. Documentary crews from National Geographic and BBC Wildlife spent weeks filming the cubs' daily routines, creating powerful visual narratives that connected their personal story to the broader conservation emergency facing East African wildlife. The footage of their synchronized play and cooperative feeding behaviors became viral sensations, generating millions of views and inspiring donation campaigns that funded expanded anti-poaching operations. Educational programs developed around their story began reaching schools throughout Tanzania and neighboring countries. Children learned about wildlife conservation through the lens of Kesi and Zara's friendship, making abstract concepts like ecosystem protection tangible through the emotional connection they felt to the cubs. Teachers reported that students who had previously shown little interest in environmental issues became passionate advocates after seeing video footage of the unlikely pair. The scientific implications extended beyond conservation into fields ranging from psychology to neuroscience. Researchers studying human trauma bonding found parallels in the cubs' recovery patterns, leading to new therapeutic approaches for children who had experienced similar losses. Their ability to overcome natural instincts through conscious choice became a model for understanding how social connections could literally reshape brain development. offering hope for treating various social and emotional disorders in both humans and animals. 2 years later, Kesi and Zara roam a protected 500-acre section of the Mkomazi Reserve, living as wild as their circumstances allow. Kesi has grown into a magnificent young lion, his mane beginning to darken with the golden-brown hues that mark his approaching maturity. Zara has developed into a sleek, powerful leopardess, whose hunting skills have become legendary among the sanctuary staff. Yet their bond remains unbreakable. They hunt separately now, respecting each other's territorial needs, but they still share kills when prey is abundant. Every evening at sunset, they meet at the same rocky outcrop where they were first introduced to their larger enclosure, touching noses in their familiar greeting, before settling down to groom each other with the gentle care that saved both their lives. Dr. Rodriguez, now in her final year before retirement, still visits them weekly. She carries with her a worn photograph from their first day together, 2 dying cubs who found family in the most impossible circumstances. The image serves as a reminder that in nature's darkest moments, love can emerge in forms we never expect to find. Last month, Zara gave birth to 2 healthy cubs, and in an unprecedented display of interspecies cooperation, Kesi has taken on the role of protective uncle, helping to guard the den while Zara hunts. Their story continues to evolve, proving that family isn't always defined by blood or species, but by the unbreakable bonds forged through shared survival and unconditional acceptance. If this story of hope against impossible odds has touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of wildlife survival and the amazing connections that remind us love truly knows no boundaries. Hit that notification bell to never miss these inspiring stories that prove miracles happen when we least expect them, and share this video to spread the message that even in our darkest moments, family can be found in the most extraordinary places.